do you say? The Rules Committee will come to order. Today we will consider H.R. 3522, the Ukraine Democracy Defense Lend-Lease Act. 62 days into Russia's vicious and immoral war, Ukraine is still holding firm. The world has watched in horror as Putin's unlawful and devastating actions have unfolded, wrecking Ukrainian communities filled with civilians. More than 10 million Ukrainians have been displaced and thousands have been injured. Tragically, Russia's brutal invasion has led to more than 2,000 civilian deaths, including 70 children. The people of Ukraine need to be warding off Russia's violent attacks. In addition to more humanitarian aid for civilians and stronger sanctions against Russia, Ukraine President Zelensky has called on the United States for greater military assistance. Congress has the opportunity now to send a clear message to Putin that Ukraine will have the resources to fight Russia's invasion for as long as it takes. During World War II, the Lend-Lease program helped the U.S. provide $50 billion in aid to more than 30 nations around the globe, providing supplies ranging from tanks, aircraft, ships, and weapons to clothing, chemicals, and food. This program became known as the Arsenal of Democracy, and it is just as essential today as it was then. S.3522 streamlines the President's current authorities to enter into Lend-Lease agreements directly with Ukraine and provide military equipment necessary to protect vulnerable civilian populations from a Russian military invasion. Our bill requires the Biden administration to establish expedited procedures for delivering equipment to Ukraine and make it easier to do so. If there's one issue that I think Democrats and Republicans can come together on and rally together behind, it's making good on our promise to help our allies and the Ukrainian people fighting on the front lines. So I hope this important legislation will get a strong bipartisan vote on the floor. Let me now turn to our ranking member, Mr. Cole, for any remarks he wishes to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing covers a single bill, which I expect will have broad bipartisan support. S.3522 is known as the Ukraine Democracy Defense Lend-Lease Act of 2022. Like the famous Lend-Lease program from World War II, when the United States served as the arsenal of democracy, S.3522 would ensure that defense articles, including weapons, munitions, and other supplies, are provided to Ukraine on an expedited basis. Since Vladimir Putin's unjust and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine 2 months ago, the Ukrainian people have bravely fought to defend their homeland and their democracy. As befits their heroic defense, aid is poured in from dozens of countries around the world. I'm very proud that the United States has stood shoulder to shoulder with our allies in providing Ukraine with aid to enable the brave Ukrainian people to continue their stand against Russian aggression and Russian war crimes. During World War II, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill said to President Roosevelt, quote, "Give us the tools and we will finish the job," unquote. That's exactly what today's bill will do. It will ensure that Americans can more easily continue to give the tools of defense, weapons, ammunition, food, supplies, fuel, and dozens of other necessary items that Ukrainians will be able to use to repel the Russian aggressors. I think we will see a strong bipartisan vote in favor of this bill, Mr. Chairman. It's only too appropriate that the House, the People's House, speaks out with one clear voice in support of Ukraine. With this bill, we share the support and best wishes not only of this body, but of all the American people, in the hopes that Ukraine's defense will soon be successful and its people can once again live in peace and freedom as citizens of a fellow democracy. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you for your excellent statement. I appreciate it. And I'd now like to welcome our witnesses to provide testimony on S.3522, the Ukraine Democracy Defense Lend-Lease Act of 2022. Representative Phillips and Subcommittee Ranking Member Wilson, we're delighted that you are here. I now recognize the gentleman from Minnesota, Representative Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman McGovern, Ranking Member Cole, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify on behalf of S.3522, the Ukraine Democracy Defense Lend-Lease Act of 2022. As the Ukrainian people fight back against Russia's unjustified, horrific, and renewed war against their country, it is imperative that the United States and our allies and partners work together to deliver every bit of assistance that we can possibly provide. Ukrainians all over the country continue to fight not just to defend their homes and their homeland, but to win as the original threat to Kyiv shifted east. And the United States and our allies and partners must recognize this new reality and shift our strategies accordingly. The weapons systems, financial support, humanitarian aid, and other assistance we have provided thus far have no doubt been pivotal in Ukraine's ability to fight back. But we must be looking ahead to what Ukraine needs to fend off the renewed Russian offensive in the east and to ultimately win this war. I strongly support the administration's efforts in partnership with Congress to provide Ukraine with billions of dollars worth of the systems that its soldiers are so well trained to use, from Russian tanks and planes, U.S. and NATO origin anti-air and anti-tank missile systems, drones, and more. But I also support stepping up U.S. and NATO training of Ukrainian forces so that we can provide even more advanced U.S. and European equipment. This bill streamlines processes to facilitate the administration lending or leasing defense articles to Ukraine and other Eastern European countries for the next 2 years. It does so by exempting the administration from provisions of law that now limit the duration of loaned equipment to 5 years only, as well as exempting such loaned and leased equipment from repayment of costs incurred by doing so. In short, it does not create a new program, as Lend-Lease Authority is already enshrined into law, but facilitates the rapid provisioning of such articles through this channel and provides Ukraine another important means of receiving needed weaponry for their fight. In closing, I express my full support for the measure and for our continued efforts to work with our allies and partners in Europe and around the world to get the Ukrainian people the help they need. Putin and Russia started this fight, but I echo the sentiments of Secretaries Blinken and Austin that Ukraine has the courage and the legitimate potential to end this in victory. And with this bill, Congress is continuing to do its part to help them achieve that end, and I urge all my colleagues to support it.
Thank you very much. Member Wilson, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Jim McGovern and Ranking Member Tom Cole. War criminal Putin has unintentionally united Democrats and Republicans, united NATO, united the European Union, united the OSCE, and indeed, I've been really grateful to establish a friendship with Dean and working together on so many different issues now. I support S.3522, the Ukraine Democracy Defense Lend-Lease Act, introduced by Senator John Cornyn, and was grateful to introduce the bipartisan companion to the Cornyn bill. And the Cornyn bill was actually adopted unanimously in the Senate 3 weeks ago. The courageous people of Ukraine have resisted effectively the invasion by war criminal Putin and his forces for 62 days. Their request is simple: provide the weapons we need to defend the homeland of Ukraine. Ukraine will win. This bill does just that by removing the bureaucratic red tape to support a loan or a lease of defense articles to Ukraine immediately. Time is of the essence, and every day that goes by means more innocent lives lost. In March, Congress was unified in support of Ukraine, providing the administration funds for use under a presidential drawdown authority specifically for military assistance. And today, with this bill, we remain unified in our solidarity with Ukraine. There is historical precedent for Lend-Lease. During World War II, Lend-Lease was enacted to provide weapons to Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and 28 other allies to defeat Nazi Germany. Lend-Lease proved integral in the outcome of the siege of Leningrad. I was grateful to have led a delegation in 2008 to place a wreath on behalf of the people of the United States at the cemetery there of the victims of the siege of Leningrad, the world's largest open cemetery of 500,000 people who were killed by Hitler's onslaught. And American equipment, I found, was very vital to defeat Hitler from seizing what is now St. Petersburg. And a real irony, the success of Putin's family's successful survival of World War II was due to American aid. Ukraine's battle for its sovereignty is the forefront of the fight between autocracy, rule of gun, and democracy, rule of law. I ask for full support of passage S.3522. I yield back.
Thank you very much. I appreciate both of you being here today. I have no questions. Look forward to seeing this on the floor. Mr. Cole.
I too have no questions, Mr. Chairman, but I want to thank our witnesses for being here, and I want to thank, through you, your committee for working so expeditiously and in such a bipartisan manner to move this legislation forward to this committee. Thank you.
Mrs. Torres. Mr. Perlmutter.
No questions. Thanks.
Dr. Burgess. Mr. Raskin? Okay. Mr. Reschenthaler?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and I associate my remarks with that of the ranking member. And it's a shame I don't have questions for you two gentlemen, because you're both my friends and you're both here. And no further questions. I clearly support the measure, and just want to thank you for your hard work on it and your willingness to come before the Rules Committee.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Scanlon?
No questions now.
Ms. Fishbach?
I have no questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Morelli?
No questions other than thank the gentleman for bringing the proposal before us.
Mr. DeSagne?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Ms. Ross?
No questions, just thank both gentlemen for being here.
Mr. Neguse?
No questions, just again would echo the remarks of my colleagues. We appreciate both of you and your respective leadership on such an important issue. Certainly proud to support the bill.
Does any other member of the committee wish to ask a question? Seeing none, I'd like to thank our witnesses for their testimony. You were so convincing. I mean, usually, you're here for 9 hours. Right, right, yeah, if you have any other materials, please leave with our stenographer or submit electronically. Anything that you'd like inserted in the record, you're now excused. Does any other member wish to testify on S.3522? Seeing none, this closes the hearing on S.3522.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant S.3522, the Ukraine Democracy Defense Lend-Lease Act of 2022, a closed rule. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate equally